Imagine this. What if your computer had a co-pilot? You could just say, hey, plan a weekend trip to the mountains for me, and it wouldn't just give you a list of search results. No, it would actually open the apps, click the buttons, fill in the forms, and book the whole thing for you. That's the incredible promise of a new technology called OS agents. And today, we're going to break down exactly how they work and what this all means for the future.
You know, for years, pop culture has kind of set the bar for what we think a real AI assistant should be. And of course, the gold standard is Tony Stark's Jarvis, right? An AI that doesn't just spit out answers to questions, but one that actually manages complex systems and even anticipates what you need. It's the ultimate digital partner.
But get this, it's not just a movie fantasy anymore. This is a serious goal for AI researchers right now. They've been chasing this JRVS dream for a long time, and it feels like the technology is finally starting to catch up with our imagination. So, how do we actually get there? Well, here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to define what these OS agents really are. Then, we'll take a peek under the hood to see how they work, how their brains get built, and of course, how they're tested. And finally, we'll look ahead at the future of this amazing tech.
All right, let's kick things off. What in the world is an OS agent? Let's get a really clear definition.
Okay, this is the key thing you need to get. An OS agent works just like a person. It doesn't need any special backdoors or fancy APIs. It literally sees your screen, understands the icons and the text, and uses the same graphical user interface, the GUI, that you do to get things done. And that goes for your laptop, your desktop, or even your phone.
And this is where you can really see the massive difference between something like Siri or Alexa and these new OS agents. You see, Siri is pretty much trapped inside its own little world of commands and apps. But an OS agent, it can see and use almost any application on your device because it understands the visual layout. It's a whole different ballgame. A huge leap forward.
Okay, so how does it actually do all this stuff? Well, you can boil it all down to a pretty simple loop. See, think, and act.
So if we're going to talk like the researchers for a second, the agent is working inside an environment, which is just your computer screen, right? It makes an observation, like, hey, there's a login page here. And then it decides on an action, like clicking in the username field and typing your name. And it just keeps repeating that cycle over and over until the job's done. And that environment can be a few different places. First up, the classic desktop. This is where most of us get real work done. And for an AI, it's a super complex place to navigate, with all the overlapping windows, different programs, and file systems.
But it's not just about desktops, right? That environment could also be your mobile phone. And that brings a whole new set of challenges. You've got smaller screens, totally different app layouts, and touch controls like swiping and tapping. And of course, we have to talk about the biggest environment there is, the internet itself. An OS agent can surf websites, fill out forms, and navigate this practically endless universe of information, just like you or me.
So what's going on inside its head when it thinks? Well, this breaks it down perfectly. First, it's got to understand what it's even looking at. Is that a search bar, a calendar, a buy now button? Then it has to plan. If you say book a flight, it has to figure out the steps. Open the browser, go to the airline's website, enter the details, pick a seat. And finally, and this is the really cool part, it has to ground that plan in reality, turning the abstract idea of select a seat into an actual mouse click on the right little icon on the screen.
Which brings us to a really big question. How in the world do you build the brain for something like this? What powers this whole thing? Okay, the secret sauce here is a piece of tech called a multimodal large language model, or MLLM for short. You already know about language models that are great with words. Well, think of an MLLM as being able to see and read at the same time. It can process both images and text simultaneously. This is the absolute game changer, the breakthrough that lets an AI look at a computer screen and understand what's on it.
So how do you train this brain? Well, there are basically two ways to go about it. On one hand, you can just feed it tons and tons of public data, like having it crawl the web and learn from the HTML code of millions of websites. But on the other hand, there's a really clever approach called synthetic data. This is where you actually record a person doing a task, like booking that flight, and then you use that recording to automatically create thousands of perfect examples for the AI to learn from. Super powerful.
All right, so we've built this cool AI agent, but the million-dollar question is, does it actually work? I mean, how do you even test something like this to see if it's any good?
Well, the testing is no joke.
Researchers basically throw these agents into a bunch of digital obstacle courses using standardized benchmarks. They're asking, can it do the easy stuff, like find a piece of information? How about the really complex, multi-step things? And they specifically test how it handles tricky situations like high-resolution screens with tiny little icons and text, stuff that's easy for us but has been a total nightmare for AI in the past.
And that brings us to the future. This technology is, incredibly promising. But it's not all smooth sailing. There are some huge challenges and, some risks we really need to talk about.
So what are the risks when you give an AI the keys to your digital kingdom? What could go wrong?
The research points to two giant hurdles. First up, safety and privacy. How do you make sure a bad guy can't use this to do something awful? And how do you guarantee it keeps your passwords and personal info safe? The second big challenge is personalization. To be really, really useful, this thing needs to learn how you work, your habits, your shortcuts, and get better over time. It needs to evolve into your co-pilot without ever putting your security at risk.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty wild final thought. As these agents get smarter and smarter, we have to ask ourselves, are we actually ready for an AI that can use our own computers maybe even better than we can? The answer to that question is probably going to shape the entire future of how we use technology.